Hello, BookTube. Who's up for a little mail? Actually, it's not just a little mail. It's a little bit more than a little mail. But you're always up for mail, or at least I tell myself you are, because I always am, and you're my captive audience. So let's see what we have here. Still no boxes, but I have a feeling that this pile has a lot of finished copies in it, which is great. So I mean, I'm perfectly happy to have 2020 books, but finished copies are usually 2019 books, and that at least means I can read them. Okay, this first one, no, not so much. This first one looks like a novel for 2020. Yeah, so this is mid-January. This is a debut novel, great, fantastic, by Jessica Andrews, called Saltwater. Let's see here. From that first salty, viscous connection through the ups and downs of a working-class childhood in northern England, the one constant in Lucy's life has been her mother. Comforting and mysterious, ferociously loving, tirelessly devoted, as much a part of Lucy as her own skin. Her lessons in womanhood shape Lucy's appreciation for desire, and her sense of duty as a caretaker, her hunger, perhaps for a better, perhaps reckless life. At university, Lucy's background sets her apart from her classmates, and London, even as she struggles with the excruciating, slow separation from her mother. Okay. Her father goes missing just as she graduates. Her shift into adulthood comes with the burden of choosing how much of her father's trouble to take on. When her grandfather dies, she escapes to his tiny house in Donegal. That's a route I very much recommend. Escape to your grandfather's tiny house in Donegal. Works wonders. A place where her mother once found happiness. There she will take a lover, live inside art and the past, track back through her memories and her mother's stories to make sense of her place in the world. Okay, so a mother-daughter story coming out in January. That is at least in part going to involve this young author's attempt at describing Donegal. I'm all for that. So let's see. We'll make a pile here. All right, so our first one was a 2020 book, but I think a lot of these things are going to be 2019 books. So let's see if I'm right about that. Probably I'm not. I noticed that a lot of the predictions that I make about the mail on this channel are completely wrong. Okay. All right. This next one is a 2020 book. It's a January book. The sheet that it came with has no information whatsoever, just blurbs. Not even the pub date. I had to look at the book for the pub date. So this is called Coleridge, the Wordsworths, and Their Year of Marvels, The Making of Poetry by Adam Nicholson. I'm going to have to just tell you about it from here. June 1797 to September 1798 is the most famous year in English poetry. Out of it came Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan, as well as his unmatched hymns to friendship and fatherhood, and William Wordsworth's revolutionary songs and lyrical ballads along with Tintern Abbey. In The Making of Poetry, Adam Nicholson embeds himself in the reality of this unique moment, exploring the idea that these poems came from this particular time and place, and that only by experiencing the physical circumstances of the year, in all weathers and all seasons, at night and at dawn, in sunset reverie and moonlight walks, can the genesis of the poetry start to be understood. I could also read what they wrote about it. You don't necessarily have to catch your death at cold, but it sounds like fun. Always up for a new examination of the Romantics, and it will get reviewed everywhere. Everywhere. Every single major literary journal has somebody at their beck and call who loves the Romantics and writes about nothing else. So there you go. If you ever want your book widely reviewed, write it about the Romantics. Let's see what this next one is. Oh god, it's another 2020 book. Okay, I was dead wrong. I guess there aren't going to be any 2019 books in this pile. Don't know how you people live with me. So, what is this next one? Oh my, World War II history. This is by Sinclair Mackay, and it is The Fire and the Darkness, The Bombing of Dresden, 1945. On February 13th, 1945, at 10:03 p.m., British bombers began one of the most devastating attacks of World War II, the bombing of Dresden. Timed to the 75th anniversary of the bombing, Sinclair Mackay's new book is a pulse-pounding work of history that looks at the life of the city in the days before the attack, tracks each moment of the bombing, and considers the long period of reconstruction and recovery. The first contingent I assume of bombers, killed people and destroyed buildings, roads, and other structures. The second contingent rained down fire, turning the streets into a blast furnace, the shelters into ovens, and whipping up a molten hurricane in which the citizens of Dresden were burned, baked, and suffocated to death. Early the next day, American bombers finished off what was left. Okay. Okay, what happened that night in Dresden was calculated annihilation in a war that was almost over. Agreed. Agreed. There's a name that should be coming to your mind now when I'm talking about the bombing of Dresden. You should be thinking of there was a German book, The Fire, from about, 30 years ago now, that was the marvel of the critical world. Everyone loved it. I loved it. But there's another name that should be coming to mind on this subject. I wonder if that name is even going to come up in this book. So Sinclair Mackay is the best-selling author of The Secret Lives of Code Breakers. He is the literary critic for The Telegraph and The Spectator, and for 3 years was a judge of the Encore Prize, awarded annually for the best second novel. And he lives in the shadow of Canary Wharf in East London. Okay, the advanced copy is not going to have an index. No, it doesn't have an index. So does it have a bibliography? Maybe. Does it have a bibliography? It has a select bibliography. How much do you want to make a bet that David Irving's name is not mentioned, that he is simply omitted from the subject of the bombing of Dresden? Let's see. I am correct. He is not in the select bibliography. So the only chance he will have to appear in this book is if he's in the notes, if he's in the index, if he's mentioned in passing. Maybe he mentioned in the introduction, only to be dismissed. Some of you will know his name. He's by now an infamous Holocaust denier, although he would say that he does not deny the Holocaust, that he obviously acknowledges that the Holocaust happens, and that what he's denying is something more complex. He would say that what he's denying is two things. One, that there was a coordinated campaign to kill Jews in concentration camps. He's not denying that massive numbers of them died in concentration camps. He just thinks there was no coordinated plan to do that. And the reason that he thinks that is the other unconventional, controversial, outrageous thing that he has put forward over the last 40 years, which is that Adolf Hitler knew nothing about it. And the reason that he does that, the reason that he puts those things forward, at least 40 years ago when he still had, was still Campos Mentos, the reason that he puts it forward is because there's no documentary evidence, according to him. He wants a document, even one document, that directly has someone authorized, that directly has Hitler knowing about this whole operation, this machinery of death. But before he got to prominence by doing that sort of thing, by saying that sort of stuff, and by going on trial, being imprisoned, the whole 9 yards for Holocaust denial, he wrote a best-selling book about the bombing of Dresden. You can still find used copies of it everywhere. It was in every library. It was consulted by every historian, including, I guarantee you, Sinclair Mackay's teachers. And now, because of what he has done later, his work is persona non grata and is just unpersoned. And I don't know exactly how I feel about that. I mean, there was a much more egregious case a couple of years ago when someone was working with primary source diaries that were taken out of Soviet archives physically by David Irving. If you're gonna work with those sources that you wouldn't even have if not for this man, then it seems just unbelievably fussy to me not to even mention his name. And this is also his subject. I mean, well, we shall see. There have been precisely two best-selling books on the bombing of Dresden. One was The Fire, the German edition of The Fire, and the other one was David Irving's book. So we'll see if he's mentioned maybe in the introduction. The author maybe brings up. It's almost impossible. People of a certain generation, readers of history of a certain generation, will associate that subject with his name. So we shall see. That's one of the downspots of not having an index in the advanced copy. But this is a 2020 book, so I don't have to worry about it quite yet. I imagine these are all going to be 2020 books, right? Because what does Steve know about the books he gets in the mail? Let's see this next one. We must forge on. We must not dilly-dally. Oh, okay. All right, this next one is from Harvard University Press, and it is a 2019 release, so I'm partially vindicated. This is Lord, look at all this paperwork. Do I need all this paperwork? No, I most certainly do not need all this paperwork. What is this? This is by Ji-Wei Shi, and it is Democracy in China, The Coming Crisis. Comes out in late November. Those of you who are up on your Chinese, how do I say that name? C-I. Is it Chi? Is it Shi? Is it Shi? Anyway. The author argues that 4 decades of reform have created a mentality in the Chinese people that is just waiting for the political system to catch up. That's kind of interesting. Resulting in a disjunction between popular expectations and political realities. The inherent tensions in a largely democratic society with a democratic political system will trigger an unprecedented crisis of legitimacy, forcing the Communist Party to act or die. Oh, wow. What are the author's credentials to make a claim like that? Of course, if the Communist Party is faced with that choice, it will die. The whole point of Communist parties is that they, when faced with the choice between adapting or dying, they die. But can you imagine? I mean, China, I have been all through China. I've spent a huge amount of time there, and I have not noticed. And this is going to sound incredibly naive and American, but I was in mostly small villages, and I never noticed any state repression. If you had transported in there from the Andromeda Galaxy without knowing anything about China's history and without knowing where you were, you wouldn't have been able to tell it apart from Topeka, Kansas. I mean, the people were the same. The people were just going about their lives, having fun, enjoying the children, that sort of thing. So, the author is a professor of philosophy of the history of Hong Kong. He has held research fellowships at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton and the National Humanities Center and the Stanford Humanities Center. Okay. All right. Well, this comes out in late November. Democracy in China, The Coming Crisis. Oh, my. Okay. I might not wait until mid-November to read that. After all, it is nonfiction November. So, let's see. Let's see what this next one is. Oh, okay. This next one is... a 2020 book, but oh, what a 2020 book. Oh my. This is great. You all are going to know this series, or a lot of you will, and if you don't, you should. If you don't, you really should get to know this series. This is a February release. This is the new Maggie Hope book, The King's Justice. This is such a fantastic series. I am probably not blurbed on this thing. Why would I be? Or wouldn't I be? Well, this is an advanced copy, so I don't know. Well, anyway, let's see here. What's going on with Maggie Hope this time around? It's delighted readers with vibrant for years, and that is absolutely true. This is the 9th installment. The acclaimed World War II series continues. This time, Maggie must use her skills to track down a serial killer who is terrorizing London, encountering new and old enemies along the way. Maggie Hope is on edge. She has returned to London after being imprisoned on a remote island for knowing confidential SOE information. But she is traumatized by her experience. As Maggie takes a break from spying, she starts to behave more and more recklessly. She drinks too much, speeds through the street on her motorcycle, and joins a squad tasked with defusing unexploded bombs left in London after the Blitz. With conscientious objectors to the war starting, when they start disappearing, when conscientious objectors start disappearing, Maggie is determined to stay out of it. Not even a missing violin belonging to a famous musician piques her interest enough to dive back into the investigative work. But as human bones start washing up on the shores of the Thames inside of suitcases, oh, I am so sold. I am so sold already. It becomes clear that a serial killer is afoot, and Maggie must put aside her hesitations and get to work. Oh man, I tell you, this series just never fails. A traumatized Maggie Hope, a Maggie Hope who is forced by trauma out of the crime detecting business is the best possible news for serial killers in London. The last thing they're going to want is for her to get back in the saddle because she's unbeatable. All right, great, fantastic. So there's a new Maggie Hope coming out in February. Great. I guess I should count my blessings that it's not coming out in November. I don't know what I would do if that were the case. I would still have to resist, I suppose. Oh, what have we got here? Fancy schmancy. Oh my, what is this? Oh, Steve's gonna like this, I think. Okay, so what is the date? That is the key. What is the date on this thing? The 29th of October. Oh no, it's getting to me a little late, but boy, oh boy, how opulent. This is The Other Side of the Coin, The Queen, the Dresser, and the Wardrobe by Angela Kelly. And it is a full color. Look at that. Some of you will know that famous photo shoot. That is an incredible photo shoot of the Queen. Oh my, oh goodness gracious. So this one works in the Queen's wardrobe, then. It works with the Queen. Well, let's find out, shall we? As you all know, Steve is a sucker for any kind of Windsor book. Let's see here. Okay, there's no pub sheet. Instead, there's an introductory note from the author. Dear reader, it took me some time to start writing this book. When I first asked the Queen if she would mind me writing another book after addressing the Queen in 2012, but by this time, our close working relationship, I never thought in my wildest dreams that Her Majesty would say yes. Once the initial shock wore over, I found myself struggling. The Queen trusts me, and she knows I would not write any intimate details or anything untoward about our friendship and working relationship, but nevertheless, I still struggled. I wanted to do this book justice. I wanted to be worthy of writing it and to share with you the magical and engaging moments that have happened between Her Majesty and myself while we have been working together. The Queen may not have thought them magical, but I did and still do. You know, I've often thought that the bookish world could very much benefit if all authors wrote notes instead of publicists. It's much more direct connection, but then again, you don't trust the author to get in all the important details. Okay, well, this is out already. It's a lavishly illustrated hardcover look at the Queen through the eyes of one of her dressers. Fantastic. Okay. Well, that goes to the head of the list. So let's continue. We still have a couple more to do here before we wrap things up. What is this next one? It's a finished copy of something. Oh. Oh. Oh my. Okay. It doesn't have a pub sheet, but I don't need one. I don't need one. Oh my. Okay. This is the finished copy of Wilfred Simon's Metternich biography. That is Prince Metternich, and this is a new biography of him, newly translated into English. I have only had the advanced copy of this. This is from the Belknap Press of Harvard University Press, and now I have the finished copy. So it's due for a reread. I've already read and heavily marked up the advanced copy that I have, but I'm glad I have a finished copy because they're going to go on the biography shelf. It's not here and then gone, so I will control myself. I can read about the Queen and Prince Metternich in one night. I don't have to choose between the two of them. Then we have this last one, and then we'll be done. And it's big and it's heavy. So let's see. Could it be another biography? Another biography would be nice. Big fat biographies are Steve's favorite kind of book. Oh, okay, it is a big fat biography. Oh my, okay. This is Charles Moore. This is the final volume in his Margaret Thatcher biography. This is Herself Alone. So this is volume 3, and he's got blurbs all over the place from the other books. This will be her final time in power. So this will be, among many other things, this will be the time when I think the world knows her the best. This will be the 1980s. This third and climactic volume, spanning from 1987 to 2013. Okay, so the last volume was absolutely terrific. At the Zenith was absolutely terrific, and this one is going to be the tail end of that, and then the sad denouement. So the highlight, the 80s, was mostly the last volume. You still get a bit of the 80s in this one. Of Charles Moore's authorized biography gives the definitive account of Margaret Thatcher's third term in office and her life after it. 3 stories run through the whole book. The first is Mrs. Thatcher's dominance of her government in almost every domestic field, but also her growing intolerance of dissent, the increasing alienation of her most senior ministers over Europe, and the fatal corrosion that followed. The second is her commanding presence on the world stage, including relations with Reagan, Gorbachev, Bush, Kohl, and Mandela. her role in the ending of the Cold War, her central position in the response to the invasion of Kuwait, and her increasing isolation as America's priorities in Europe changed. The third is how she, a woman, coped and led a political worlds almost entirely occupied by men. The three stories come dramatically together in the autumn of 1990 when, at the moment of greatest domestic danger, she traveled to Paris to participate in ceremonies ending the Cold War. The chapters detailing her fall are, in their drama, unmatched in modern political biography. Well, I certainly trust this author to do that, because the previous volumes in this series have been fantastic. I don't think I still have the last one, so I'm hoping the publisher can maybe come through with that. I'd love to reread the last volume before I dig into this one, but this is this year. This is, mid-November. So 2 big biographies to end this out. That's not that bad a way to end a mail haul. So we have Margaret Thatcher, Herself Alone, the final volume in this big book, in this big series. Then we have Metternich, big, beautiful volume, now in an English language translation. We have The Other Side of the Coin, an intimate look at the world of the Queen. Then we have the new Maggie Hope book, The King's Justice. Democracy in China, The Coming Crisis, What Would Happen. Sort of fascinating. We have The Fire in the Darkness, all about the bombing of Dresden. That comes out in 2020. We have The Making of Poetry, both Coleridge and the Wordsworths, and also a 2020 book. And finally, a debut novel, Saltwater, by Jessica Andrews. So not bad, although, I mean, there's quite a bit of variety, and there's quite a bit that intrigues me, although I'm pretty sure I've made it pretty clear about the parts that intrigue me the most. So I'm gonna dig right in. But I'll wrap this up. But I'll be back. Thank you, Book 2.